Alright, Tom. Game theories claimed before that they figured out FNAF. But this time, have you really figured out FNAF? Have you really figured out Afton's objectives? I've been watching game theory for over a decade now. No matter what these guys come up with, it's always fun to talk about and obviously react to, so that's what I'm gonna do for you guys. Let's get started.
Doro Steel Wool Interview reveals the true purpose of the most recent FNAF book, even though it's set in the Pizzaplex and focuses on characters we know like Gregory
okay. I didn't like this book that much.
Biggest reveals
It was fine,
much earlier in the
but it didn't
history.
really tell us
Very
anything.
interesting about our favorite Urple killer.
Urple.
Hello Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's always gassing up the importance of tiny details in FNAF books. And just a little while ago, we got ourselves the third and, at this point, final choose your own adventure style FNAF book.
The week before was my favorite.
Pizzaplex. It promised to be an exciting final adventure where we would take on the role of Cassie, who is playing hide and seek alongside our good pal Gregory as the animatronics go.
Isn't that Cassie's
in a
old model?
Prequel to Security Breach. Needless to say, I and most other FNAF theorists were excited for this one. Maybe now we'd get some of the answers we've been desperately seeking to the very confusing lore of that game. But what we actually got was a lot more confounding. Like, the book is fine, but compared to the week before, Return to the Pit, it wasn't really giving us anything in the lore department. We did get to see Gregory in action in his more GGY Dr. Rabbit state, hacking the animatronics,
barely
being a bit of a jerk, and we got to see Cassie's friendship with both Gregory and Roxy present itself a little more. But neither of these things did what we were hoping for. I personally was hoping for answers like, how did Gregory become a slave to Glitch Trap? Or why is Cassie seen as so important to
come on,
But no, we got nothing of the sort, which is why it's taken me this long to come up with a theory. I've been scratching my head for ages trying to figure out what the point of this story was. What was it trying to tell us? And it wasn't really until the
maybe I'll like it more.
I was chatting to friend of the channel Rye Toast about this book that suddenly it hit me. I'd been looking at this all wrong. Rather than looking at the characters we know from the franchise, I needed to look at the new character it introduced. A new kind of staff bot called the Reagent, with hoses for arms and a gas canister.
I thought his name was the Regent.
Uses to incapacitate Cassie in dozens of the book's endings. Eventually, this thing is destroyed by either Cassie or Roxy, depending on the ending you get. Because this guy isn't
chemical reagent. I'm
so
stupid.
We gotta get rid of him so we don't mess up the timeline even more. But then the question Ryan and I both had was why? Why introduce him at all if you're just gonna have to get rid of him? Why not make it one of the other Glamrocks or Gregory or heck, make it the first modern appearance of the Mimic in some way? But the more I pondered and banged my head against the wall, the more I began to realize that Scott absolutely had a purpose for this character. It just wasn't to do with the current lore of the franchise. It was pointing to something much further back in the franchise's history. Something that we're likely to get a glimpse of in Secret of the Mimic very soon. The main thing we learn about this guy is that it has mysterious gas powers that it uses to incapacitate.
Is this going to tie to sister location somehow?
Who's homework now, eh, Poppy? And so, just like with Poppy, the first thing I wanted to do to get to the bottom of this new character was to figure out what this mysterious gas actually is. Because when you call your character the Reagent, that has consequences. A reagent is a real scientific term that refers to a substance or compound that is added to a system to cause a chemical reaction. And you know, if you're gonna use scientific terms to name your characters, we're gonna science the heck out of those characters. So what do we learn about this mysterious reagent gas? Well, the most standout parts are what it does to Cassie when she encounters it. Quote, your eyes and throat burn. The moment you move, vertigo seizes you, and you can't seem to make your arms move right. They're too heavy, as if they're made of lead. You blink, your eyes flooded with tears. Then
so Afton's committing war crimes?
Cassie also mentions coughing, fuzzy vision, and dizziness in
the reagent
the book. So that's a pretty extensive list of symptoms to work with. Immediately, my mind went to something like carbon monoxide, the silent killer.
No,
it's a very common but very dangerous gas that when breathed in takes
Didn't she see the gas?
Symptom boxes.
Carbon monoxide's invisible.
Dizziness, loss of muscle control, and while it isn't often associated with coughing, that is a symptom that can occur in certain individuals. Eventually, all of this leads to a loss of consciousness and death. Plus, it is used scientifically as a reagent, so we're off to a pretty good start. But it's not quite a perfect match. Carbon monoxide doesn't cause your eyes or throat to burn, hence it's called the silent killer, because you often can breathe it in and not know it's affecting you until it's too late. It's also called the silent killer for another big reason that doesn't work with our mysterious gas: its odor, or more specifically, its lack of odor. You cannot smell carbon monoxide when it's leaking, which is why you should always have a carbon monoxide alarm installed in your home to sense it for you. Now, I wouldn't put it past Fazbear Entertainment to ignore this crucial safety step, but Cassie does have something to say about the smell of this particular gas. Quote again, "A noxious cloud follows in its wake. The thick, sharp scent
exactly, she sees it.
fills your nostrils." It actually repeats that point about it smelling like chemicals a few times throughout the book, which means it cannot be carbon monoxide. With the smell being
glue in gas
with chemicals and the reagent being responsible for, quote, cleaning the Pizzaplex of organic matter, I wondered if this could be something like chlorine gas. Chlorine is generally used as a disinfectant for things like swimming pools, but in gas form, while it can be used as a reagent, it's also incredibly dangerous. Just like carbon monoxide, it can cause lightheadedness, dizziness, blurry vision, and muscle weakness. But it also has the added effects we're looking for, like the burning sensation in the eyes and throat, which leads to coughing and watering eyes, and it has a strong chemical smell, typically reminding people of cleaning products like
passing out.
It also has another quality that carbon monoxide lacks: you can see it. In that previous quote from Cassie, we learn that she's not only able to smell the gas, but see it. Quote again, "A noxious cloud follows in its wake." Sadly, we don't get any descriptors in the book about its color or anything. That would be way too helpful. But the fact that it's visible at all is important for us to bear in mind.
If they gave
Chlorine
a color,
gas is visible, usually a yellowish green color. So why is this not the end of the video?
They might have gotten it wrong and made it more confusing if they showed its color.
The problem is that I can't get this clip from Rye Toast's stream out of my head.
The tanks in the scuba room, they are labeled nitrogen.
But these gas canisters aren't just anywhere. They're in the basement of the Pizzaplex. This nitrogen is being used somewhere in the Pizzaplex, and the only thing we've really seen using gas in this building is the reagents. That means that the most likely suspect for the gas being used within Fazbear is a nitrogen-based gas, which, as you can tell by the name, chlorine is not. So we gotta try again. We need a gas that is visible, smells of chemicals, burns the eyes and throat, causes dizziness, heavy limbs, passing out, be nitrogen-based, and be some kind of reagent.
Nitrous
This is
oxide?
becoming way more complicated than I intended. Who'd have thought that a game about a possessed animatronic murder bear wouldn't follow the logical rules of the real world? But I'm nothing if not determined. And so I did what any logical, sane person would do in this situation. I looked up every single nitrogen-based gas that has ever
I'm guessing nitrous
existed
oxide.
and compared it to our symptoms. I'd like to say it was fun, but even the nerd in me was screaming. As I crossed off options from the list, I was left with only one possibility. Something I'd never heard of. Dinitrogen tetroxide.
Okay, nitrogen
It
and
has a sharp and
oxide
pungent
is
smell
in
of
it.
Chemicals. If breathed in, it can lead to every symptom we've mentioned. As the name suggests, it's nitrogen-based, and while it is by default colorless,
I've never heard of
nitrogen
this.
tetroxide has a fun little quirk that solves that problem. It exists in a permanent state of equilibrium with another gas, nitrogen dioxide. Dinitrogen tetroxide literally cannot exist without nitrogen dioxide, because both chemicals share a reversible chemical reaction. Dinitrogen
know.
tetroxide breaks apart into nitrogen dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide molecules combine
would
to
the
create
writers,
dinitrogen tetroxide.
Scott
this
and
reaction is happening constantly, not
whoever
only
he wrote the
creating
book
a
with,
weird chemical concoction, which is exactly
have
how the
thought
book describes
about
this
this
substance,
gas.
by the way, but it also changes the color to a reddish brown. And if that wasn't enough of a clincher, dinitrogen tetroxide has one other very interesting effect. Much like the other gases we've mentioned, it is a reagent. It helps create chemical reactions between a number of different compounds. But the type of reaction that caught my attention was that dinitrogen tetroxide can react with a number of different metals to form what are called metal nitrates. And these can then be used in future reactions to combine the metal compounds with carbon-based organic compounds. Now, where have I heard of that kind of combination before? Oh, that's That's right, Remnant.
Remnant?
Yes. In this universe, the soul is a
Oh, no.
tangible thing that exists. It's not just some ethereal thing. It physically is attached to the metal, and when you melt down that metal, it remains attached, which led to the creation of the fun times. The soul is a real thing, and if it's a real thing for us organic, carbon-based life forms, then it too could be considered organic matter, meaning that this gas, the reagent, it's all part of turning these kids into Remnant, just like Rye theorized.
Can it just be a fictional gas?
It's also worth considering that Rye found these canisters in the scooping room of Ruin, and the scoop blueprints we got from FNAF 6 revealed to us that the scoop was designed to inject Remnant into animatronics.
This part's interesting to me. Why did they put nitrogen
These
in the
tends to
room?
be here in that same
It has to be
room.
something to do with the
Feels
scoop.
like they have to be connected, and so the remnant for the scoop and these nitrogen-based canisters are also connected. And when you think about it, it actually helps explain a lot about what the Mimic is trying to do.
This is
In
quite the
Security
chemistry
Breach,
lesson.
During the bad ending, we learnt of 9 missing kids, but we've had no idea what happened to them.
They
Now,
got
thanks
scooped.
to Ruin in the books, we know that the Mimic has been copying Afton and his murderous tendencies. Like in VIP, we see the Mimic program present itself as a pig mascot and lead kids into the back room to be killed, which is pretty familiar. But what we're talking about today allows us to take it one step further. The Mimic isn't just copying Afton's killings, he's trying to recreate the missing children's incident in its entirety, converting their souls into Remnant just like Afton did in the games that the Mimic was partially trained on. Now, listen, I get that all of this might seem like a stretch. Believe me, I do. Referring to the soul as organic matter feels weird, and even then, there's no way
kinda is, though.
nitrogen tetroxide would work as a reagent
In the
for that
universe.
specific compound. At the end of the day, Scott isn't a scientist. He's a fiction writer. But at this point, he knows that we
Don't say
theorists
that-
will
don't say that
look
about-
at the real-life comparisons to find our
Don't say that about
answers. And as
Scott,
time
maybe he
goes on,
is.
It's become clear that he's trying to work with that and make the series feel more grounded. We've moved away from spiritually possessed animatronics to an AI villain. He
Scott
got
likes
rid of
sci-fi.
sound illusion discs and swapped them for hallucinogenic gas. And that is what I think this mysterious gas is really about. It's him trying to find a way to more believably ground the series, retroactively explaining part of Afton's scientific process, so that when the grounded AI villain tries to mimic him, it's not having to suddenly go back to the old sci-fi and paranormal tricks, undoing all of that progress. It's not a perfect one-to-one because the kind of thing he needs just doesn't exist. But what does exist is close enough to make his point. However, even with the answer to this gas question,
So he's
somewhat
scuffed?
solved, as I sat
What is-
there
what if
staring
Edwin
into
is
the
Gregory?
void that is my FNAF whiteboard, I remembered that that was only part of what I set out to solve. Sure, this has been a fun experiment trying to identify the gas, and it's even more fun to find its connections to Remnant. But that in and of itself hasn't really changed how we look at this franchise, outside of the idea that the Mimic is now creating Remnant, not just killing kids, which is fine, but it's not exactly mind-blowing. It doesn't help us understand where this franchise is going, and despite all of this
That's a
effort,
cool-
I didn't feel any closer to actually solving the mystery I set out to. Why
neither do
did
I.
Scott introduce us to a brand new character who, in the end, suffers from the classic prequel issue of having to be gone before the end of the book because he wasn't in Security Breach? Legitimately, at this point, I was at a loss. I was ready to throw this entire theory out and just act like the book didn't even exist. That was until Dorko's interview with Evan Lampert, the
Dorko?
creative director of Secret of the Mimic.
Ah.
Carefully are you putting the books in consideration of Secret of the
You don't know the
Mimic?
full
We've
story.
actually been talking about making this game for a long time, and we were developing the game kind of while these books are coming out. It's interesting to work kind of in dual mediums.
Secret of the Mimic was being developed alongside the books. They are directly
Yeah.
influencing each other. Once again,
Yeah.
I'd been looking at this all wrong. Escape the Pizzaplex appeared to be about Security Breach, but in actuality, its story is supposed to tie into Secret of the Mimic. So I went back and watched the trailer over and over again, looking for something that connected this game to the weird reagent we've been analyzing. And guys, I think I found something big. In this trailer, there is a new character, Dolly the nurse. Well, I say new. We've actually heard from Dolly before. During the first aid minigame in Help Wanted 2, there's a voice that speaks to us over the intercom that, in the game files, is referred to as Carnival Nurse, as in Fall Fest, which takes place in the 1970s, just like Secret of the Mimic. And now we get to see her firsthand in all
Maybe?
of her creepy
Depends on if the
doll-like
voice actor's the
glory.
same.
But tell me, do you you notice anything familiar about her? The thing on her back might just look like a normal backpack, but coming from the backpack are a pair of hoses.
Yep, it was in
that
the
then connect to
part two.
Dolly's hands, just like the reagent. The reason we are being shown the reagent now is because we were being prepped for the new character that was about to be introduced, Dolly, who has a similar design feature and therefore a similar function. And that connection has some wild implications, because if the reagent is using a gas that helps prepare human kids for remnant creation like we suspect, that would mean that Dolly is doing the same thing. In 1979! What? How? Remnant came about as the result of Afton's experimenting with the animatronics after his son died and he committed the missing children's incident.
Or
now I'm
was
saying it
it?
exists 4 years before his son even died? That can't possibly be the case, right? And honestly, at first, I thought so too. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this change actually lines up with a number of other predictions we've made recently about the start of the FNAF timeline. In my first Secret of the Mimic theory, I spoke a lot about Fall Fest, Fazbear's circus that ran throughout the 70s and 80s. Thanks to some tweets from the developers and my love of Shakespearean theatre, I was able to infer that Charlie's death and the missing children's incident were not Afton's first rodeo. He'd actually been killing kids for a long time. But what if it wasn't just the killing that had been going on for a long time, but the experimentation as well? In earlier parts of the franchise, it felt like Afton was always the businessman, while Henry was the animatronic genius. But as time went on, we were shown that actually William was also a bit of a scientific genius himself. However, in the fourth closet, he tells us that there is a crucial difference between him and Henry's designs, something he called the spark of life. Henry was able to make his animatronics feel alive, something Afton was unable to achieve on his own. But he was desperate to figure it out. So why wouldn't he begin experimenting, trying to figure out how to get life into his animatronic creations? Back in my initial theory, I didn't really have much of an explanation as to why Afton was killing all those years ago, other than he was just a bad man. But this would actually give it some level of purpose.
His character
He's not
needs
killing aimlessly
this
or for
development
fun. He's doing
still.
it because he needs to beat Henry. I also theorized recently that Afton always had an accomplice in his murders, based on the inclusion of a plush baby luring us to be killed by a yellow rabbit in Return to the Pit, which takes place in 1985. I concluded that we were being shown that Baby has always been there to assist Afton, even as far back as Fall Fest. I wondered if maybe Secret of the Mimic would reveal what that looked like, and well, Dolly could be the one I was looking for. She does have some very similar design features to Baby, from the Funtime split face to the arm joints being almost identical to Baby's. Even the medical symbol in the middle of her midsection looks similar to the fan that Baby has in her midsection. Plus, they're both voiced by Heather Masters. It's a small thing that we can't put too much weight on, but I figured it was worth mentioning. Dolly would also be the perfect accomplice for Afton during the Fall Fest Carnival era. He'd be able to hide all his murders in a medical tent out of sight where regular people aren't able to go. He'd have all the medical tools he could possibly need.
So,
and in 1979,
William sent
no one's gonna
Dolly
question the
to
nitrogen
Edwin's
gas canisters, because nitrous
facility?
oxide, i.e.
Or didn't-
laughing gas, was still used
I mean, I guess
in medical practices
Dolly
until
isn't
the
built
mid-80s.
like Edwin's
And the cherry
designs.
on top of all of this is that if I'm right, it massively changes Afton's entire motivation during the original series of games, and the
That is true.
famous line that he gives his son before he dies: "I will put you back together." This line has often been used as Afton's main driving force. From here, he would go on to kill some kids and learn about the secrets of Remnant. But I remember when we were writing our Ultimate Timeline, we kinda had to fudge the evidence a bit when it came to how he knew that killing kids would be the solution. The best we could come up with is that he'd seen it in characters like Baby or the puppets, all of which makes that line more of a hope, a desperate father just trying to save his son. But now, if the Remnant experiments have been going on since the 70s, this line becomes a certainty. The reason Afton knew he'd have to kill the missing children and put them into suits is because, by this point, he'd have some pretty solid understanding of how it worked. He'd been experimenting with souls and possession and Remnant for the last 4 years. When he sees his dying son, he tells him it's going to be okay, and that he'll put him back together
Because he knows how?
He knows it's possible. He just needed some more test subjects like he'd had all the way back in 1979. But in just over a month, the day of reckoning is coming. Secret of the Mimic is finally going to release, and the past 2 years of theorizing is going to be put to the test. And I have something special planned for when that happens. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that announcement. But until then, guys, remember, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
World premiere on Game Theory.
FNAF's main villain has been keeping a secret from us since the beginning, and none of us caught it.
I'm going to be streaming Secret of the Mimic when that comes out, so if you want to watch my blind reaction to that, consider subscribing. But with regards to this video, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it looks like there's some design similarities between the Reagent and Dolly. And yeah, Dolly, it does seem designed to be more like an Afton creation than a Edwin creation. So what, is she like Mr. X? She just gets deployed into MCM to collect Remnant? I'm confused what's happening here. Or did Edwin make her for William? I'm not sure about this one. The only way I can see this working would be if Dolly was Mimic's creation, and so Mimic creating Reagent was just him reusing his old design. Not necessarily that William made Dolly and Mimic was copying that, if that makes sense. I mean, the chemical thing was fun. I'm not sure if the gas was supposed to be a real gas, but I mean, game theory always likes to put real science into things. It's fun. It's part of the fun. I'm still not too big on Escape the Pizzaplex. It was fine, but like, it was exciting to have books that seemed directly canon, unlike books that people debate could be canon or could not be. And so I was hoping to get big answers in each one. But it is fun, I guess, as Tom said, that we got to see Gregory be GGY and stuff. So I'd rather this book have taken place after Ruin, but I guess that they're saving that for potentially a future project. Anyway, like I said, I'll be playing Secret of the Mimic when it comes out. So if you want to watch me play it and be hopefully mind blown, consider subscribing. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this reaction, and I'll see you next time. Bye.